I'm Susan. The courtroom was thick with the smell of old paper and stale coffee. At 9:12 a.m. The judge looked up from the sealed report and said my name, Senior Analyst Susan Miller. The air in the room seemed to freeze. My stepbrother, Jake, who had been wearing a smug grin just moments ago, saw it vanish. My mother, Linda, had her hand mid-air, and it just froze there. These were the same people who had always called me too dramatic. They thought this was just another family squabble. Little did they know, this was a federal case with evidence they couldn't wriggle out of. Before I tell you how a once quiet daughter turned her family's lies into silence, hit that like button and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know I'm not alone in having to let the truth speak louder than family. Our family, from the outside, was the picture of perfection. We lived in a big, two-story house with a white picket fence and perfectly trimmed hedges. Every Christmas card had our smiling faces, thanks to my mother, Linda. She was a firm believer in the idea that peace meant pretending that silence was love. The perfect family image was everything to her. My stepfather, Tom, went along with it all. And my stepbrother, Jake, was the golden child, the centerpiece of this carefully crafted illusion. At family dinners, it was always about Jake. Mom would look at him like he hung the moon. Jake just got another promotion, she'd announce, clapping her hands as if it was the most momentous news. Jake would raise his glass, that easy grin on his face that hid the rottenness beneath. Assistant regional manager, he'd say proudly, as if it was some royal title. Everyone would laugh, except me. I'd be sitting there, cutting my food, feeling like an invisible ghost in my own home. One time, I mentioned that I'd just completed a federal certification, one that only a handful of analysts ever passed. Tom smiled absent-mindedly, his eyes still on Jake. "That's nice, sweetheart," he murmured, patting my hand like I was a little kid who'd drawn a cute picture. "You stick with that government job. It's safe." Safe? That word always came from people who'd never done anything brave. They had no idea what it was like to spend nights in a soundproof room, reading encrypted messages that could save lives. They didn't understand the weight of classified intelligence in my hands. I'd long since learned to stop correcting them. Growing up as the extra child in this family, I'd become an expert at being quiet. I knew how to make myself small, how to smile at the right times, and how to swallow my words before they caused trouble. Mom liked it that way. She'd say, "Susan, you think too much. Just enjoy life." But she didn't mean my life, she meant not disturbing hers. At every holiday, the same pattern repeated. Jake would show up late, half drunk, with a bunch of excuses. Mom would light up like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, Jake, I'm so glad you made it," she'd gush. But if I was late, she'd glance at her watch and sigh. Punctuality says a lot about a person, Susan. It was like living under a double standard, and I didn't realize how much it was killing me until much later. It wasn't that they hated me, it was worse. They simply didn't see me. In their world, I was just background noise, the responsible daughter who didn't need attention and wouldn't cause problems. They mistook my silence for obedience. I used to think that keeping the peace was noble, but I soon realized that peace without truth was just paralysis. One memory still stings. A year before everything fell apart, we had a summer barbecue. Jake was standing by the grill, bragging to Tom about his latest promotion. The air was filled with the smell of smoke and cheap beer. I remember the sunlight hitting Mom's hair as she laughed that loud, carefree laugh she only reserved for Jake. When I tried to share a small victory, that my team's analysis had prevented an overseas attack, she brushed it off with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You always make things sound so dramatic, Susan. Just relax and enjoy yourself." That word, dramatic, stuck in my mind like a splinter. That night, while they slept, I sat on the back porch with a mug of black coffee, staring into the dark yard. Fireflies blinked above the grass, and the air was heavy and warm. I thought about how in my world, precision and silence saved lives, but in this house, silence just fed lies. Something inside me was slowly changing, hardening into something unbreakable. Then, one fateful night, thick with heat, silence, and the smell of whiskey, everything changed. I heard a crash, a glass hitting the counter, followed by Jake's slurred, angry voice. I found him in the kitchen, bathed in the bluish light of the fridge. The air reeked of alcohol and arrogance. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" he said with a crooked, mean grin. "What's wrong, agent girl? Still think you're better than the rest of us?" I kept my voice low and calm. "You should go to bed, Jake. You've had enough." That was my first mistake. To him, calm meant control, and he couldn't stand that. He stepped closer, waving an empty bottle like a prop. "You think that desk job makes you special? You don't even have a life, Susan. Mom says you hide behind work because no one wants you around." Those words hit me harder than they should have, because I knew they weren't just his. They were Mom's words, recycled and sharpened. From the living room, I could hear faint laughter. Mom and Tom weren't asleep, they were listening. I turned away, reaching for a towel to wipe the counter, just wanting to end this. That's when I heard the drawer slide open, the scrape of metal against wood. I turned back, and he had a screwdriver in his hand. "Jake, stop," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Put it down." He smiled that wide, wrong smile. "You're so dramatic." And then he lunged. A searing pain tore through my shoulder. My knees gave out, and the world spun. I could feel the warmth of blood spreading through my shirt and the slickness under my fingers. And over it all, I heard laughter. First soft, then louder. Mom's voice floated in like poison. "Oh, Jake, for God's sake." She probably slipped. "Susan, stop being so dramatic." The room spun, and the walls seemed to close in. Somewhere between the pain and disbelief, something in me detached. I stared at the ceiling, thinking how quiet the world was when you stopped expecting anyone to care. But then, through the ringing in my ears, I realized I was still breathing, still awake, and still in control of one thing: what I'd do next. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a sterile, white, humming hospital room. The antiseptic smell hit me first, followed by the beeping monitors. My shoulder felt like it was on fire. For a moment, I thought the silence meant safety, but then I heard Mom's voice. "Oh, thank God you're awake," she said, her tone rehearsed and brittle. She sat primly beside my bed, hands folded like she was at church. Tom hovered behind her, pretending to look worried. "You gave us such a scare, honey. You tripped and fell on the toolbox. Jake feels just awful about it." I stared at her, the words slowly sinking in. "I fell?" She nodded quickly, too quickly. "You know how clumsy you can be when you're tired. It's no one's fault." That perfect, practiced rewrite of reality snapped something in me. I could still see the glint of the screwdriver, the blood on the tile, and hear her laughter echoing in my mind. I forced my expression to stay neutral. My training kicked in. Observe, assess, control. "Where's Jake?" I asked. "At home," Tom said. "He's been beating himself up all night. You should have seen him crying." "Crying?" "Right. The same man who'd called me pathetic hours ago." "I'll be fine," I said softly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Can you both give me a minute?" Mom smiled, relieved that her version of events had stuck. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll bring you some clothes later." They left the room without another glance. The second the door clicked shut, I exhaled slowly. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone on the tray table. The hospital lighting reflected off the black screen, showing a face I barely recognized. Pale, composed, with eyes colder than I remembered. I unlocked the phone and opened the secured line, the one my family didn't even know existed. My fingers moved automatically, muscle memory overriding the pain. When the operator answered, I spoke clearly. This is analyst Susan Miller. I'm reporting an assault on a federal employee and the activation of a duress protocol. There was a pause. Confirmed, analyst Miller. Duress code received at 0405 hours. Incident file initiated. Relief didn't come, not exactly. What I felt was precision, the kind of clarity that comes when you stop asking why and start acting on fact. Within hours, a legal liaison from my agency, Lisa, arrived. She was all business, in a sharp suit and with sharp eyes. She didn't waste time with sympathy. You did the right thing, she said, opening her folder. Your SOS triggered an automatic wellness check. Paramedics found you on the floor with a penetrating wound. Everything's documented. We'll let the evidence speak. I nodded. My voice came out calm. They think this is a family matter. She smiled slightly. Then we'll show them it isn't. As she stood to leave, I caught my reflection in the dark hospital window. My shoulder was bandaged, and my eyes were unflinching. For the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter. I felt like a weapon with paperwork to prove it. Back in the courtroom, Jake's lawyer, a slick-looking man with shiny shoes and a TV commercial grin, rose dramatically. Your Honor, he began, this case has been blown completely out of proportion. It's nothing but a family disagreement. Ms. Miller, my client's stepsister, has a history of emotional outbursts and exaggerated claims. Even her own mother will testify that she tends to dramatize. There it was again, that word dramatic. Mom's legacy to me. The lawyer went on, flipping through his notes with a showy flair. My client regrets the misunderstanding that led to Ms. Miller's minor injury, but the evidence clearly shows there was no intent to harm. It was an accident. When he finished, he turned to my family as if expecting applause. Mom nodded approvingly, Tom exhaled like a man relieved of a burden, and Jake sat back with an easy shrug, his hand brushing his tie. Lisa didn't move for a moment, then she stood up quietly. Your Honor, she said, the petitioner would like to enter into evidence Diplomatic Security Service Report number 77B, accompanied by 911 call logs and sworn federal statements. Jake's lawyer laughed under his breath. Your Honor, this is a domestic dispute, not a federal investigation. The judge, a silver-haired man with weary eyes, raised a brow. That's quite a claim, counsel. Let's see what this is. Lisa handed the sealed folder across. The judge ran his thumb along the edge, noted the official seal, and then broke it open. His eyes scanned the pages, and his expression changed. First curiosity, then disbelief, and finally something close to anger. This report, he said slowly, documents a Level 4 duress protocol activation under the State Department's security framework. It states that senior analyst Susan Miller, an employee with federal clearance, transmitted a distress signal at 0405 hours. The system logged her coordinates and immediately dispatched a wellness team. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. The judge kept reading, his voice steady. Responding paramedics found Miss Miller semi-conscious on the kitchen floor with a puncture wound consistent with a Phillips head screwdriver. Her blood was present on both the weapon and her clothing. Toxicology reports show Mr. Jake Miller's blood alcohol content at 16. He lowered the papers, his eyes narrowing. Do you wish to amend your statement, Mr. Miller? Jake blinked, his mouth opening and closing. That's not what happened or not what you expected to be recorded. The judge snapped. Mom rose halfway from her seat. Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. Susan, she's always been sensitive. The judge cut her off with a raised hand. Sit down, Mrs. Miller. The silence that followed was heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the walls. Lisa's voice broke it softly. Your Honor, we're not pursuing damages. We simply request that the truth be recognized and that the petitioner be granted a permanent restraining order for her safety. The judge nodded slowly, flipping to the last page of the report. He read something silently, then looked at me. For a brief second, his expression softened. "Miss Miller," he said, "it appears your work may have saved lives in the past. Today, your precision saved your own." He turned back to Jake. "Based on the evidence before this court, I am granting a permanent restraining order and referring this matter to the district attorney's office for formal felony assault charges. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Miller from the room." Jake's face went pale and slack. He tried to look at me, seeking some sympathy, but I had none left. He stood only because the bailiff helped him. Mom's voice cracked. "Susan, please. He didn't mean to. He's your brother." Lisa stepped between us. "That's close enough," she said, her tone calm and final. I didn't move or speak. For the first time, I wasn't begging anyone to see me. They were finally looking, and it didn't matter anymore. The bailiff led Jake out, his wrists bound in steel. Mom sobbed quietly, and Tom stared at the floor like he wanted to disappear. The judge gathered his papers. "Court adjourned," he said, his voice echoing. As people shuffled out, Lisa leaned closer. "You did good," she murmured. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just told the truth where it mattered." We stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off the marble floors. Waiting by the exit were two men in dark suits, my colleagues. One of them, Director Thompson, gave a small nod. "Glad you're okay, Miller. We'll handle the paperwork." That was all. No hugs, no sympathy, just respect, the language I'd always wanted to hear. Through the courthouse windows, the morning sunlight was breaking through the gray sky. For a moment, I let myself breathe it in. The world outside was the same, but I was different. Behind me, I could still hear Mom's voice, faint and desperate, echoing down the corridor. "Susan, wait. We need to talk." I didn't turn around. Instead, I walked toward the light, each step steady and deliberate. My shoulder still ached, but the pain felt different. It was earned, claimed, and understood. The truth had done what I never could. It silenced them. Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The chaos was still behind me, muffled by stone walls and locked doors. I stood at the top of the steps for a moment, watching people pass who had no idea what had just happened inside. Lisa walked beside me, closing her briefcase. "They'll process the charges this afternoon," she said quietly. "You won." "I wasn't playing," I replied. She gave a small, knowing smile. "Exactly." Then she left, her heels clicking away until the sound faded. Down the steps, Director Thompson waited by a black car, phone in hand. He looked up, his nod precise. "Glad you're all right, Miller. Take the rest of the week off. We'll handle the fallout." "Thank you, sir," I said. That was all we needed to say. In my world, closure came in documents, not hugs. As the car door shut behind him, I looked back at the courthouse one last time. The sun hit the windows, reflecting a flash of white light across the glass, like the final glare of a closing file. For the first time in years, I didn't feel unseen. I felt finished. A year later, I was standing in a glass-walled briefing room, the city glittering behind me. On the door, it read Susan Miller, Team Lead, Clandestine Threat Analysis. My team gathered around the console, sharp minds and steady hands, the kind of family you earn, not inherit. A faint scar traced my shoulder, a reminder of the night I stopped asking for approval. That morning, an email from Mom appeared in my inbox, long and apologetic, full of excuses. I didn't open it. I just archived it. Some silences are deliberate. If you've ever turned betrayal into power, share your story below and hit subscribe.